Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the GradCracker webinar featuring Sellafield. So Sellafield advertises their placements and graduate opportunities on GradCracker and have been doing so for over the last 5 years. They also sponsor the GradCracker Toolkit, so check out their hub after the webinar to find out a little bit more about them. So Sellafield led the world in nuclear power. They are now moving into an era where they will transform the environment, local society, the regional economy, and the nuclear industry. So let's find out a little bit more about Sellafield and meet Ross, who's a recruiter, Holly, Sean, Louise, and Luke. So welcome everybody to the webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. Ross, starting with you, my love, could you tell the students about your role at Sellafield and how would you describe the company?
Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm Ross Gardner and I work in the recruitment team. I've been in the recruitment team for about 6.5 years now, probably focusing on graduate and early careers recruitment for the last 4. So my role really looks at the recruitment strategy, how we're going to find our graduates, how we're going to fill all our places, how we interact with companies like GradCracker, and I also get really involved in like our digital aspect, so our careers website, any kind of digital attraction as well.
Like I've worked with you forever, Ross.
And GradCracker is so great for finding stuff out. So yeah, it's been really good for helping us find graduates over the years. So yeah, the company is, well, as everybody knows, it's a really big place. We've got over 11,000 employees, and we've got an even wider supply chain. So people that join us have got such a breadth of opportunity when they join us. It's not just, you know, you might come in as one thing, but your career could go in so many different directions. You're not just pigeonholed into one place, which is a really good thing about Sellafield. One thing to add is, you know, people hear the word decommissioning and they think we're closing down, and that's not the case. You know, we've got nearly 100 years of work behind us, so your career could start here and end here if that's really what you wanted. So yeah, it's a fantastic place to work. Yeah,
I bet there's quite a lot of misconceptions about Sellafield and what you do as well. So I'm hoping to kind of dig around those today and find out a lot more about you. So thank you very much for the introduction, Ross. What we're going to do now is go around the room, meet the grads, and also get their top facts about Sellafield. So Holly, I'm going to start with you. Could you just introduce yourself to the audience? You're smiling already, which is a good sign. Introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a bit about your background, where you studied and what you studied at university.
Hi, I'm Holly. I studied chemical engineering at Edinburgh University. I'm actually from the Wirral, so near Liverpool, so it was a bit of a big move for me, and then another move to West Cumbria. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing like science and engineering at school and at A-levels, and so did engineering at uni, and then basically I became really interested in process safety, and that's what led me into nuclear safety, and that's how I became basically applied for the safety case scheme at Sellafield.
Yeah, and what sparked your interest in safety and process safety to begin with, Holly?
It was through courses that I did at uni. So I did a course on like basic process safety and then also advanced process safety. And I just found it really interesting, and I really thought that it was important to study the accidents that had happened and figure out why they'd gone wrong and how we can stop that happening. Like I felt quite a responsibility as an engineer that should not happen again. And obviously with Sellafield being such a dangerous place, I want it to be, you know, as safe as possible. So
thank you very much for that, Holly. And your top fact about Sellafield, can't forget that top fact.
Yeah, so my top fact relates to Calder Hall. So this was actually opened in 1956 on the Sellafield site. So obviously the Sellafield site's massive. There's so many different facilities going on, but Calder Hall is the one that kind of interests me the most. This is basically where is the first place where commercial power was produced for the electricity grid from nuclear. And it operated well over its intended lifetime. It actually operated for like 47 years. And it created huge amounts of obviously like renewable electricity.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Holly. Looking forward to speaking to you a little bit more about your role a little bit later on in the webinar. I'm going to move on to Sean now. So Sean, where you went to university, what did you study, and your top Sellafield fact?
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Sean. I did an integrated master's in electrical and electronic engineering at Bristol. I did my final year dissertation on electric propulsion systems, and I'm currently in the electrical design grad scheme for Sellafield. So ever since A-levels, I like the design aspect and understanding how systems work and put them together. And yeah, that's what I'm working on currently at Sellafield.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And what did you just describe GradCracker as, Sean, when we met before?
It saved my life when I was looking for jobs after uni. It really did help.
I think we need to change the strap line.
Yeah.
GradCracker, saving
lives.
Life, yeah.
No, Sean was actually quizzing me and Jess before this webinar. I was like, hang on a minute, I quiz people, not the other way around. Thank you very much, Sean. And your facts about Sellafield?
So my fact about Sellafield is actually home to the 4 biggest nuclear risks in the whole of Europe, according to the government website.
Perfect. I love the way you reference that as well, according to the government website. Just yeah, Thank you very much, Sean. Luke, I'm going to move on to you.
Yes, so I did chemical engineering with nuclear technology at the University of Sheffield. So I did an integrated master's that included a year's placement at Sellafield. So I was on the placement scheme. I was lucky enough to be offered a job at the end of it, and now I'm back on the graduate scheme, and I'm a process design graduate.
Lovely. We're going to find out a little bit more about your journey as well, from your placement scheme to becoming a grad a bit later on. Louise, could you introduce yourself to the audience, please, and finish off with your top fact?
Sure. So my name is Louise. I have a degree in environmental science and a master's in environment management from Lancaster University. So unsurprisingly, I'm an environment graduate here at Sellafield. And my top fact is that, as Holly said, it's a really big place. And as a matter of fact, it measures 6 square kilometers. So it's really quite big. There's a lot to see.
It's huge. One of my favourite pictures about Sellafield is a bit of like a bird's eye view of the whole site, and that's on the GradCracker hub. So yeah, go and check that out. So thank you very much, Louise, for your facts. And Ross, you're going to finish off with a fact about the graduate intake this year.
Yeah, so to jump back to recruitment, for our 2022 intake, which will start in September, we're actually looking for 98 grads, which is our highest ever intake of graduates, about 30 up on last year. So yeah, quite a big community of new graduates will be joining us both at the Sellafield location and our Risley offices.
Yeah. Perfect, thanks Ross. And just so you guys know who's watching the webinar, Sellafield are still open to 3 placements and 4 graduate opportunities, and obviously there's multiple positions available into each of those opportunities. So go onto the GradCracker hub after this webinar and apply to their positions. There is a bit of an alert, so the closing date is this Sunday, so make sure you apply sooner rather than later and get your applications in, because Ross wants to hear from you. What we're going to do now, thank you very much, Ross. What we're going to do now is speak to Luke and Louise about your experiences of using GradCracker when you put your applications together. So Luke, when you started your placement scheme at Sellafield, just going back a couple of years, how did you utilise GradCracker in your job search, and what stood out about Sellafield to make you apply to them?
Yeah, so I mean, quite similar to Sean. GradCracker was the website that I went to. It was really useful to have all the things in the same place. It was almost like a money supermarket type thing, where you put all your deals in, and then you choose the best ones, and you've got all the options there. So I really enjoyed having it all in one place. Yeah. It was really good being able to filter, being able to use the different filtering tools to go and find the place that best suited me. And in terms of Sellafield, I mean, similar to what the other people have been saying, is that it was the first commercial nuclear power station. So I think that was really interested me. I knew that nuclear was something that I wanted to do when I went in throughout my career. So it was trying to find that. It was and trying to really decide on where best suited me. And the challenges that Sellafield are faced with are unique. That there's no blueprint for how you can solve this problem. You're going to have to design it yourself. It allows for a lot of innovation, for a lot of deeper thinking and deeper understanding, and that's something that really appealed to me. And I sort of gathered that through reading it on the GradCracker website, and then moving on to onto the Sellafield website. So.
What's the end game for Sellafield then, Luke? Or this is anybody who wants to answer the question, really. 10-year plan for them. What do they want to achieve?
Well, I think that's a question for the executives. But overall, the idea is to return the site at the moment to what is classed as a greenfield site. So at the moment, it's a brownfield site. It acts as an industry. It acts on the industrial scale. It is returning it to Greenfield and to be controlled. Now, I think that is planned to take over 100 years going forward. So by similar to what was said earlier, it's not just a case of 10 years and it's done and there's nothing left of it. It is a long plan going forward. I think that one of the biggest issues going forward is a creation of a safe disposal facility for the nuclear waste, and Sellafield is pioneering that, is moving that forward with the help of the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. If that is brought about, if that was built and operated, then that would have a massive repercussions on all the nuclear industry and then also the whole energy industry. I think there's a lot of nuclear energy is great. We're not 100% sure what to do with all the waste at the moment. If we can manage to pioneer a way to treat the waste, to deal with it, to safely dispose of it, then that opens massive doors going forward to help with the conversion from fossil fuels to renewables or low carbon energy sources.
Yeah, Sellafield's definitely leading the way out these. So thank you for that, Luke. So I'm going to move on to Louise now. So similar question, Louise, to what I've just asked Luke. What parts of the GradCracker hub, Sellafield hub on GradCracker, sorry, did you find the most useful, and why did you choose Sellafield?
So about the company hub, I'd say I looked at every single tab. I don't think I can select. Yeah. I really did my research before applying, but I think the people's profile was really useful because it basically looked into different experiences of different graduates, and they gave the top tips for the assessment center or the interviews or even on the graduate scheme. And I think I'm still following some of this advice even in my role now. Yeah. So I'd say that was the most useful tab. And the reason why I chose Sellafield, so during my undergrad, I studied a module called The Causes and Consequences of Environmental Radioactivity. And obviously Sellafield was mentioned, and we studied it a little bit because it's an institution, isn't it? Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. So I ended up doing my master's project on the fate of Sellafield radionuclides.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you could say I just tailored my studies to come and work here. And I just thought it's such a huge challenge from an environmental perspective. I wouldn't be getting the scope of work that I'm currently being involved with in any other company, I don't think.
When you were studying for your master's and you did a project on Sellafield, were you able to go and visit the site, or did you just do everything from, like research on the internet and put your project together that way?
No, so I didn't really visit the site because I was doing my project in a salt marsh in Lancashire because of the way currents in the sea work and just this transport and deposit radionuclides there, and also because it was during COVID, so I couldn't really go out and about that much.
I knew the COVID word was going to crop up there, Louise. When I asked the question, I thought, oh, I bet this is COVID. Thank you very much, Louise.
Can I just ask, sorry, Carla, Louise, can I just ask, in your application, I'm guessing you did mention a lot about, the work that you'd done and how you tailored it to Sellafield. And Ross, I'm going to kind of then sidestep to you as a question, just on applications, because again, it's something which I say all the time on a daily basis at the moment, make sure you target your applications. I know that was obviously a perfect scenario for you, Louise, doing a project that was relatable to Sellafield, but can you kind of give that advice as well, Ross? Is that something that you like to see in your application? Obviously, if they can prove something that's kind of a bit relatable to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's probably what we look out for, because in some instances, some of the roles are really overrun with applications. So to stand out, if you're submitting the same thing to every employer, and believe it or not, we actually get applications with other employers' names on. So doing that little attention to detail before you submit something, it is vital, because if you've submitted something else to us, when it's an instant, you're not engaged with our with who we are and what we're trying to achieve, which is to create the clean and safe environment for future generations. And it's just as if you're applying for loads of jobs in one go, and somebody else will stand out ahead of you. And especially if you've done a project on Sellafield, or if you've done even just your own research, not everybody's going to be in that position where they will have an instant link with Sellafield. But as long as you've done your research and looked into the profession you're applying for and kind of tailored your application, you will definitely stand out across the others.
Yeah, brilliant. That's
and
good.
And this is why we put the hubs together, like you just mentioned, Louise, and we do work hard to think about what you as students would want to know about Sellafield. So this is why we put that on the videos and the employer profiles and everything else. And again, like Ross just mentioned, mention the fact that you've done your research, show off, mention that you've watched this webinar, for example, because this is really what Ross wants to, I was going to call you Ross then, what Ross wants to hear about. So thank you for your experiences there, Louise. And now on to the opportunities that you do have open. Ross, I'm coming back to you. So mentioned at the beginning that you've got 4 graduates and 3 placement opportunities open. Tell the audience a little bit about those, please.
So graduates, I think we've got left open engineering and maintenance, commissioning, construction and safety support. And the first 3 are mainly engineering roles. So we'll be looking probably for civil and electrical across those, civil and electrical engineering. For the safety support role, we are open to the wider STEM backgrounds. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what placements are still out, but I think it follows a very, very similar theme to the graduates. We do open quite early for all of our opportunities, so quite a lot of them have closed off now already, but don't let that put you off. You still might be suitable for what we've still got out there. And if not, we open every year sort of towards the end of August and September. So if what you're looking for isn't here now, you can always look again next year. But like Luke said earlier on, the placement scheme is an ideal route into the graduate scheme. And during your time on that scheme, you will get objectives to work on. And if you meet those objectives, that's how you then get offered a graduate role once you've done your last year at university. Similar sort of thing happens with our summer placements, which has now closed. So you would do like a mini assessment centre as well, and then get the chance to be offered a role. And obviously, if you've done that placement and got that experience, you've got that kind of step up against anybody else. So the placement students are considered first before the graduates apply, if that makes sense.
Does, yeah. Well, Jess is going to, I'm going to speak on your behalf, Jess. So make sure you do your placement, because then it makes your final year at university so much more easier. But yeah, so like Ross said, there might not be something open for you guys at the moment, but follow Sellafield. So they will be opening back end of August, September. I'm going to say next year, but next year is going to be this year sooner rather than later. So yeah, make sure you either follow or get your applications in. What I'm going to do, Ross, is I'm going to skip over to Jess now, and Jess will speak to the grads, and then we'll come back to like timelines and assessment centres and things like that, because I'm really excited to get to know about their stories.
So Holly, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. I know you've spoke a bit about your job title, and obviously you can kind of sense in your job title what your role is all about, but if you could just tell us all in a bit more detail, what is life like for you so far at Sellafield?
So I've really genuinely enjoyed life at Sellafield so far. As I said, like I was already interested in safety, so I knew that the subject matter would interest me. But I actually didn't do any really any physics when I was at A level, or I mean, obviously I did engineering at uni, but I think I lacked quite a bit in like the sort of nuclear physics knowledge, but they've really helped me like get up to speed with all of that. And it's not been like, for example, the safety support role that I think that's been advertised, you don't have to know, like you don't have to feel like you have to know everything. Like they will support you and they will help you. So I work for Safety Case, which is slightly different to safety support, both super important, but basically so safety support, and they work with more like conventional safety hazards that happen on site. So obviously there's just so many risks and hazards, like for example, I don't know, a crane falling, like handling, movement kind of things, but then there's also like specific nuclear hazards as well. So I work with more of like the nuclear hazards. In particular, I work with basically stopping a chain reaction happening where we don't want it to happen, which would obviously be very bad news. But we both have to work together really. So I will be on placements at some point with safety support graduates, and hopefully we'll get to see like what they do, and we'll be able to kind of like share learning and stuff like that. But yeah, so far it's been really interesting, and I've really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. So I can imagine there's almost the known knowns. So like what I mean by that is like the obvious hazards. And then I can imagine there's stuff which you don't know what could happen. Because Luke, you mentioned earlier, you've got sometimes waste that you don't necessarily what to do with or where to put or whatever. So I can imagine that role is kind of evolving all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, the hazards all interact with each other, which is what makes it even more complicated. So like a really basic example, if you have a fire that happened, like you've got the interaction between the nuclear hazards and conventional hazards. So for example, if a fire happens, can we spray it with water or foam to put it out? Or will that actually, like, obviously that will help put the fire out, but because we've got nuclear material that we're dealing with, will that then lead for us having a nuclear reaction? And then like, will the opposite happen that we don't want? And yeah, so it is really interesting. It's obviously very complicated as well, because like Luke said, like this is a challenge that isn't being dealt with anywhere else. And so this complex mixture of hazards you're not going to see elsewhere, which is I think why I was really interested in Sellafield and why I wanted to really just jump into process safety here, really, because I didn't think I'd get that anywhere else.
Yeah, 2 points I want to make, Holly, because the first thing you said earlier about the physics side of things and not knowing as much maybe as what you'll know now. But I think sometimes that is a bit of a worry for students, isn't it? So I think sometimes when students are applying for jobs, they think they have to know everything, and you don't. That's the whole point of the program. The employer can teach you those bits. So would you say your skills have improved massively, not just in physics, but in other areas?
Yeah, definitely in loads of areas. I think the main thing is just being like open to learning, really, even if it's slightly different than what you're used to. So obviously, because I did chemical engineering, I had quite a strong chemistry and maths background, but like I say, less so with nuclear physics. But even with things like, I've recently started learning how to code in a program called Monk, which is basically a program that we use to try and predict like how these neutrons are going to interact with each other and whether we're going to get a chain reaction, basically. And so it sounded really complicated when they first told me about it, but I think the main thing was that I was just excited to learn and open to learn, and that's what made it easier to learn.
And that is the key, isn't it? If you've got an open mind, you're willing to learn, it'll, take you most of the way, won't it? Just the other thing, and I don't know if I'm allowed to go down this route, Carla and Ross are probably thinking, oh, what's she going to say? But, from your, I think there is a lot of misconceptions around the nuclear industry, but also from you, Holly, with your role and, so safety aspect, what would you say the biggest misconception for you is? If you were to tell, maybe convince a student that's maybe never considered the nuclear sector before, what would you say a misconception is?
I would say, well, definitely the biggest misconception that like my friends and family have thought since I've started is that it's not safe to work for, that like if you work on or for like a nuclear facility, that you'll be exposed to super high levels of radiation, and then you're obviously more likely to develop cancers and things. But actually the background levels of radiation that we all get is quite low. It's like 2.7, and you only get, I think, you only get like one extra if you work, and it's spread over a year as well, so it's really not as much as you think, and it's actually very, very strictly controlled. Like even last week I did a training course where we had to learn how to use like the Geiger counters on our body to pick up, and like when you go in and out of a controlled area, it's so strict. You can't even like wear the same socks. You have to wear shoes that are only meant for that contaminated area. It's actually a lot. It's very, very safe. Like it is much safer than you think.
Yeah, I remember when we've been somewhere, was it STFC, and we had to have something on our.
That's what I was just thinking. We had lanyards.
It
was a lanyard, wasn't it? And it was because we were going in different places.
Radiation, didn't it?
Dose meters. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
So do you have to wear that, a lot of you, all the time when you're?
Yeah, so I mean, it will depend obviously on what placement you're doing. So at the moment, my placement isn't as heavily based on site, so I don't have to go onto site as much. But I think within the next 6 months, I'll be going onto site more, and then that'll mean that whenever I enter a controlled area, I always have to be wearing
And I think that's a great, a really good point to make, because I think there is those misconceptions, but your role exactly, Holly, is preventing all this stuff. It's making sure everyone can work in a safe environment. So key. So next on my list, so thanks, Holly. Next one is Sean. So I'm going to come to you, same kind of question. Tell us a bit about your role and what you've been up to.
So I've got a lot of similar things to say as Holly. Because I'm in design, I'm in the design offices in Warrington, which is near Manchester. I'm not quite brave enough to go to Cumbria and bear the cold. So basically what my role is we provide design solutions for any issues and requests for changes that happen from site in Cumbria. So in my role, I've been to site twice, and you got a nice big coach from Warrington, and they take you to site and you meet the system engineer and they show you what you're working on. So a lot of the time, because Sellafield is so old, we have, for example, a system that detects radiation. It's 60 years old. They don't have any more spare parts. The company doesn't exist anymore. So it actually becomes a hazard, because if that breaks, then you can't detect anything, and we might have, I don't know, a nuclear issue, which will be a big problem. So trying to introduce new modern technology into old systems are quite difficult, and that's what our design team does. So the biggest issues is it compatible? Is it cost effective? And is it safe enough? Similar to what Holly was saying, even from the engineering aspect, yes, there's a physical aspect. When you're there, you have to be safe and you have all the right dose meters and counters to make sure you're not getting radiated. But even in designing the systems, one of the jobs I'm working on, there's an issue because we can run a signal, it'll work, but we haven't deemed it safe enough, so that can't happen. So now we've got another design issue where we have to work around it and try and figure out a safe solution that will make everyone happy. So in doing so, site will say we need this replaced. We do all the work and try to figure out what's right. We do all the paperwork, we update all the drawings in CAD, and then we have to get it verified. So our team really makes sure that all the drawings and documentation is kept up to date. Everyone's on the same page and all the documentation is there. Something does go wrong, and we can do all the tests, and then it gets fixed on site, and then we keep dealing with these requests, and that's what our design team does. So I moved from London all the way to Manchester, so it was a big scare for me as well. I didn't do physics at A-level either, and with electrical design as my job title, I was kind of like, oh, I'm gonna have to know everything about electrical design, and all my uni stuff needs to be in here. But in the team, there's a lot of support. Even when I first came in, my manager wasn't around a lot, to be honest, but he gave me a lot of people in the team to show me the ropes, essentially. And it was really nice just to ease into it, and slowly you start with small tasks and you start getting involved with more things. And it was nice. I've had a really enjoyable experience. The grad's really lovely as well, and there's like a lot of support mechanisms that you can get wherever you are in Sellafield.
And Sean, do you want to tell us about your cakes?
My cakes, okay. Let me get ready for this. So every Thursday, the grads have decided to have Grad Cake Thursday, which is every week someone's nominated to bring in a cake. So you can either buy it or bake it, and then one of the grads assesses it on like quality, quantity, the wow factor, and effort, right? So we have like this competition every Thursday. So this week it was my week, and I made red velvet cupcakes with buttercream, bit of sprinkles to boost up the wow factor. So I'm gonna get assessed and then see how far I get up the list. But it's a good laugh. Like it's hard because everyone's working in different departments, but we have like a table in the canteen just for the grads. So every day, like we spend 45 minutes together and get to know each other. And there's also lots of socials that we go to. So it's a really nice community. And even as literally the only Southerner, I think I'm here, I'm still fitting in, and everyone's treating me nicely.
Luke, do you want to critique Sean's cake live on air?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not the person that goes and reviews this cake. I don't think I'm qualified, but it was a very nice cake. I was very impressed. He might not look like a baker, but it was very good. Yeah.
I think Sean's a self-admitted man of many talents, aren't you, Sean?
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't look like it, but got a lot of tricks up my sleeve.
It's good that you've got that community though, isn't it? You can all get together and have a bit of a natter every day. So yeah, I really like that.
Holly, did you say that you're up in Cumbria?
I am, yeah.
Louise,
I live about 20 seconds away from Louise.
Oh dear. You'll have had the snow the weekend.
Well, I was actually back on the Wirral at the weekend, so I was just trying to get, I thought I wouldn't be able to maybe get back home if it got any worse, but so I didn't see it.
Yeah, because our boss Sean, who'll be watching, he lives in Cumbria, and he was showing us these absolute idyllic scenes of snow, and it just looked winter wonderland. Gorgeous.
Well, nothing stops people from going for a walk here, so they'll go in the snow. Or
that's because we're our northerners. Sean will be sat in, as in Sellafield. Sean will be sat inside with your jumper and your long johns on.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to it. Like, if you put me in the field, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Let's see what happens, because we do have to do a 6-month placement there and training there. Like, I'm excited to go, but I'm not excited to stay there. If you get what I mean.
You'll be fine. Just pack warm clothes.
Yeah. Take a jumper. Thanks, Sean. Well done on the cakes. Let us know what score you get. I'll be interested to see. You should actually send us a picture.
I can do, yeah.
Put it on the hub.
On the hub.
Sean's cake.
Yeah, Sean and your cake. Louise, going to come to you next. Same question, if you can remember it. I nearly forgot it myself. Was your role and what you've been up to, and tell us a bit about what life is like for you.
So my role is environment graduate. My current placement is in the corporate environment team, and I'm working for 2 different teams at the minute. One of them does permitting and processes, so they look after every single permit we've got for discharges, this kind of permits that are granted by the Environment Agency, which is one of our main regulators. And the other team I work for is the strategy and development team. So I work on projects around corporate sustainability, carbon management, and life cycle analysis. And basically my whole 2 years are mapped out so I can become a fully competent environment advisor, where I will be able to give advice whether I'm based on plant or in the offices. Yeah. And I've really been enjoying the graduate life so far. I think the job is really interesting because you don't really get this kind of challenges in many other environment sectors. And I'd say it's quite a vibrant graduate community. I've made the move from Lancaster, which is a student town, to West Cumbria, which is a little bit more remote. So I was quite worried about making friends and socializing, but everyone's been really going out of their way to get to know each other. We've had a couple of events where we got to meet, and that was really nice.
Oh, brilliant. That's good. Like, it's kind of marrying what Sean said as well, that community feel, which is great. And you need that, don't you, if you go into somewhere a little bit more remote. So Louise, just sticking with you then. So in terms of, I guess your program so far, I guess you've got a good indication of where you're going to end up career-wise. You're going to be working obviously in that particular section of the business, but what, have you had any misconceptions? Have you learned much? Obviously, doing your qualification so far, you kind of knew what to expect. Probably you already knew the issues. Was there lots of areas that you've had to learn, or has it been quite obvious for you?
I'd say both yes and no. So I feel like I've really been able to apply a lot of things that I've been learning at university. So we reviewed some of the legislation, and now I'm working on this legislation. So it's really been a learning curve from university, because now instead of learning about the things, I'm actually doing them. I've been given quite a lot of responsibility, I'd say. I'm not doing really high level stuff, but I'm still given ownership of my projects, which I think is really good because it really helps my development. But so I'd say it's a logical learning curve, because nothing I'm doing is making me wonder why I'm doing it. It's all a logical progression, but I'd say the depth and the complexity is a bit higher, although my team is really supportive with everything and every question I may ask them.
Perfect. No, that's good. That's really interesting. So thanks, Louise. And then Luke, I'm going to come to you. Tell us a bit about your role and what you've been up to.
Yes, so I work in the same section as Sean. Sean's an electrical engineer, I'm a process engineer. So we provide sort of support to plants on the Sellafield site. So as Sean said, there's many facilities that are sort of older, that have like legacy waste to treat, etc., like that. And then it would be up to us to design them in a way that would be safe. So I would work with someone like Sophie to be like, I'm designing this system. Is it going to be safe? Is it going to apply with the regulations? So our main regulators are the ONR, which is the Office for Nuclear Regulation, and the EA, which is the Environment Agency. So we work on a way of how can we get the job done, but how can we get it done safe? And it's always a balancing act between getting the job done and trying to deliver the mission, which is to provide like sort of a safe site for future generations. But then also, how can we do that safely as well? Obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that you need to consider, a lot of risks, similar to what's been mentioned before. If I do this thing, then great, it's fixed my problem, but I've created sort of 3 or 4 more risks. And how can I, so my job would be, how can I design that out of the system, but also under sort of a time pressure, under we need to get stuff done, we need to operate, etc. Because it's a lot of sort of a balancing act between, if we do nothing, then is it going to be worse down the line than if we do something that maybe gives a bit of a risk at the time, but actually for the next sort of 30-40 years it's going to be dealt with, and you don't have to deal with it. So I think there's a lot of decisions to be made right at the top of like the executive level, but then also that filter down coming through it. So yeah, so that's mainly just a bit of a brief overview about some of the
Brilliant.
issues.
And sticking with you, Luke, what would you say your favourite project has been that you've been involved in so far?
My favourite project, so I'd go back to my industrial placement year actually. So I mentioned previously that we want to put in all the waste into what is called a deep geological repository, and I was working on a model which if you would have told me that I was doing modelling in my industrial placement year, I would have been like, no, I don't want to do it. I'd always, when I was at uni, always did modelling, always was just like, oh, just it's so difficult to learn, so difficult to get the resources, etc. But I was working on this this model that would track the wastes that come from different facilities, and basically put them into the deep geological facility. So it was a lot of trying to understand what type of waste we've got, when facilities are available. It was more in like a planning directorate than necessarily like the engineering side. And I suppose that goes and highlights like the different roles that you could get. So I came here thinking I'd be a design engineer, and I'm like modeling, and I'm like planning how certain facilities will empty in sort of 50 or 60 years time, and in order for how they're going to enter, then how they're going to like work in 50 or 60 years time, what do we need to make sure that we've got online in 20 years time and 10 years time, or whatever. So that was a really interesting project and gave me a big overview of the site, because it's massive. It's 11,000 people, it's a lot of different plants, a lot of different facility areas, etc. That gave me a really good overview of that.
Do you know what's interesting hearing from you all? You all have, the number one key thing sounds as though it's safety. And then after that, it's, you're weighing up all the time is, what can we do now to prevent and, be proactive and reactive? And what's the future looking like? So I suppose it goes back to that point what you said earlier, Ross, about, you hear the word decommission, and it sounds as though it's, coming to the end of its life, or, that's it, project done, but it's not, is it? There's so much stuff to be thinking about. And Luke, you've covered quite a lot of those points of, do we do this task now, or do we leave it? And then, might have a bigger problem down the line, or do you face the problem now? It sounds as though you're constantly thinking, but you've all got very similar problems, but working on completely different projects.
So it almost sounds like you're at the start of everything, doesn't it? As well, it's, you're at the start of something else to move forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. So sticking with projects, Sean, I'll come to you next. What's the favourite project you've worked on so far?
So the thing with PFDO is that we get different tasks from different parts of site. So you do have the option when you do join engineering to work on some of the bigger projects that do take 20, 30 years to finish. So in my job in plant-facing design, it's very fast-paced. So at the moment, I have 5 jobs going on, but the issue is a lot of it is on hold, because when you do work at Sellafield, like you get genuine real life engineering problems, and sometimes there's a delay and you've got to talk to site, you've got to wait for communication, you've got to wait for the suppliers. So I think the most technical job and interesting job I'm working at the moment is the example I used earlier, where we had an obsolete system that's monitoring the gamma radiation in some water. And the place where you can see where everything's happening is like 150 meters distance in this building. So the old system uses this cable. So in electrical terms, you've got this really long cable, you've got a tiny signal. You're not going to get it that far because it's going to degrade from all the losses. So with the new system, we aren't able to put it across 150 meters. So you're saying, oh, why don't we just put some new cable in?
Yeah.
The issue is that, the issue is that that's going to cost like tens of thousands of pounds, because we have to put it through buildings. So yeah, the issue that we're trying to find a new and like innovative way to put in the new equipment while using this existing cable. And like I mentioned earlier, it's the way we're trying to do it isn't recognized as, like I say, safe enough for Sellafield. So that's the problem we're trying to work on now, and it's a real head scratcher. So yeah, it's a bit difficult.
Interesting. Can you put something around it? I don't know.
Just go through walls.
But yeah, so one of the new jobs I got today, it's a lot different. So we have a crane, and basically the remote, it's like a little remote control, like it's got like a tiny RC car. That doesn't work anymore, and they don't sell the parts. So we're trying to find this new wireless controller. So because it's new, we don't know if it's safe enough, it's not tested. So I need to look through a lot of documentation and write up like a safety report and a design justification for this new piece of equipment. So in PFDL, you are literally working on different things in different areas. Yeah. Even though I'm electrical, I'm dealing with process people, mechanical people. And yeah, it's not just you're stuck in electrical, you're literally all over the place trying to learn different things. And it is interesting, but it is fast paced, and yeah, it is like real world engineering, to be honest.
Yeah. I like that as well, because you will be learning from lots of different people, won't you? And sometimes you'll probably learn something, and then, you know, maybe even a year down the line, you think, oh yeah, that could apply to this. Or yeah, interesting. Louise, going to come to you next. Favorite project that you've worked on so far?
So I've not worked on a lot of projects because I've already started a couple of months ago, but I'm really enjoying working on the water permit application, because it allows me to work to different areas of the business, people doing the project, a couple of engineers, but also the rest of the environment team, and might eventually get to meet stakeholders from the Environment Agency, which is a really good development opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Is water a problem sometimes?
Definitely not a problem, no, but because the industry is really heavily regulated to make sure everything is safe as usual, we just need to put in applications whenever we want to do something a bit differently to make sure that everyone knows what we're up to. It's really regulated, essentially.
I can imagine. Yeah. Again, safety, health and safety. Holly, coming to you, health and safety. Favorite project?
So I'm really actually enjoying the project I'm working on at the moment. So basically, we are hoping to implement a new X-ray machine into one of the rooms within one of our many buildings, basically. And essentially, what we're going to be doing is like scanning packages that we've received from Dounreay. So that there's actually a nuclear research facility up in Dounreay, and they sent us all their packages, basically. And bit of a panic because we don't really know a lot of the state of them, of what's inside. So some might have had corrosion, etc. So that's why we need to scan them, basically, and figure out what state that they're in, so that we know how to deal with them. So I'm trying to figure out if introducing this X-ray booth to this room will basically incur any criticality hazards. So I mentioned before about like the chain reaction thing. So will it increase the likelihood of a chain reaction happening? Will it affect, for example, like the alarm system in there, so that we won't detect if a chain reaction happens? So I have to write, like, it's called a CPM, but basically I have to write like a report summarizing that it is going to be safe and that they can like go ahead with it, basically. But yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting because I have to kind of get involved with a lot of different areas as well, and speak to a lot of people and like kind of network quite a bit. yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, wow. And just one question, how do you do your job then? So, because technically they could all be theory. So you think, oh yeah, nothing's going to happen. You turn the X-ray machine on and then it does happen.
So basically you try and predict like all the bad things that could happen. So what happens is, for a new process such as implementing this X-ray booth, you'll do what's called a HAZOP, which is basically where you'll literally get into the very, very nitty-gritty of it, and you'll consider every single thing that could possibly go wrong and how it could go wrong. And these can take, so these are meetings that happen over days, and they can take literally hours, and they're really, really important. And basically they help us figure out like what controls we need to put in place should this happen, should someone drop a package, should a package overpressurize, like so once they've been done, like you can't really do any new work unless you've done a proper hazard assessment, basically. So a lot of the work that I do, hopefully in the future I'll be able to get involved in like writing my own hazard assessments, but yeah, and you need like loads of input for them as well, because obviously you need input from engineering, you need input from conventional safety, you need input from me in criticality, you need input from people who work with the dose and shielding monitors as well. So yeah, it's a big task.
I bet you have a bit of a love-hate relationship though, honestly, with some department, they maybe want to get something done and you're like, no, 1 minute, let me just check.
I thought that, yeah, like that, to be honest, but that hasn't happened so far, because obviously I'm not in a position where I can really give approval or anything to anything yet. But I think, as you've heard from everyone else, like safety is everyone's priority. So even if you're not directly working in process safety, it's always at the forefront of your mind. So absolutely. I think that they'll be understanding if I tell them that they can't actually
wait a minute. Yeah, absolutely.
5 packages at a time, because they will explode. So don't do it.
I just have to give Rona at Doomray, Doomray obviously advertised with Gradcracker as well. So Rona at Doomray, hello, I was speaking to you this morning. So yeah, you've got a mention now. It's part of the famous webinars. So thank you very much, Holly. Ross, we're going to come back to you now and just speak about the graduates and the interns early stages at Sellafield. So obviously the grads have done a fantastic job to sell Sellafield and everything that they can get involved in. But what support is offered to graduates who are joining in the first few months? And I think you want to cover off about the Graduate Council, which sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, so we've got a dedicated graduate development team which are there to support the graduates and students throughout their time with us. So that's, looking at the training that they're doing, making sure that the placements are suitable for them and they're rotated around different areas so they get a mix of experience. I mean, because we recruit for so many different professions, everybody's experience can be slightly different, when there's 12 different professions, but within one profession they're looking for 4 different types of engineers. Sometimes everybody's experiences can be different, and I would say the development can a lot of the time be driven by the graduates, so making sure that they're really proactive and pushing themselves forward and asking for that training and asking for that support from the teams that are available. But yeah, graduate development do a really good job, and they start off with a bit of a welcome week, try to get everybody together and create the sense of community, as we've heard from the graduates themselves. But the Graduate Council, so they are a group of graduates. The graduates might correct me here. I'm sure it's the graduates that are in the second year that are elected into those roles. Is that right? Yeah, I'm right. And they specifically look after sort of like the graduates' like welfare. So they'll get feedback from graduates and feed that into that team. So there's a voice for them to be heard, and they can look at things like the training, and they arrange social events. They sort out the STEM work, going out to schools or other kinds of promotion to promote STEM careers to sort of younger people as well. So yeah, the Graduate Council do an amazing job, and they come to kind of like the governance of the scheme as well. So they've got that like input into the people that are making all the decisions. So the scheme kind of not essentially ran by the graduates, but it's kind of, they've got the right voice and they've got that way in. So yeah, but the Graduate Council do good work with like charity and stuff like that as well. So they'll run charity events, and stuff along those lines. So yeah, loads and loads of good work.
Yeah, it sounds it. Thank you very much, Ross. And everybody's mentioned about the location of Sellafield being quite remote or quite rural. So can you tell the students who are watching what's on offer relocation-wise, and what help do you give the graduates if they have to relocate to Sellafield?
Sure, yeah. So most graduates do relocate from somewhere, and any graduate, even if they move into Sellafield or Warrington, is supported with a relocation allowance if it's from more than 30 miles away of, I think it's £1,400, which is something like £175 a week for your first 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's to kind of help you get settled into a new area. And I mean, I know how a lot of our graduates feel, you know, moving from somewhere like London or Manchester to a place like West Cumbria. I mean, I grew up in West Cumbria and I moved to Newcastle, and I was like, I'm never going to move back, and here I am. But it's a different way of life, you know. You're not in that hustle and bustle of a city, and but it is like more of a community, and there is still small towns with things going on. You kind of got to like, you go out there and find your way, you know. Not everything's on your doorstep as much as it would be if you were in a city, but you have got that nice way of life, you know. You're not getting stuck in traffic for hours and hours and hours a day, you know. You can go and walk in the Lake District. And on the flip side, you know, the guys at Risley, the offices are based in Warrington, so I guess you could live, you know, in Manchester if you like, or in the surrounding areas, and still have that kind of city life. So yeah, our two locations are polar opposites, but kind of give two different ways of life. Yeah. Well, West Cumbria is probably not what people expect. You know, people probably get off the train and are a bit like, whoa, there's not much here. But once you get into it and you get into a community, and, you know, I love it here. I think it's great. And you still have that, you're not stuck here, you know. You can still get to cities if you want to do that. You can still meet up with friends and go away, which a lot of graduates do. But I think, you know, the majority of the people that join us are coming from cities, so we have to be wary of that, and, you know, make everybody feel as comfortable and in a community, which, you know, when you're recruiting kind of a big number of graduates like we are this year, 98, there's going to be a lot of people in the same position as you, looking for house shares, looking to meet up, looking to, you know, create that sort of community.
Yeah, and you're on the coast as well, aren't you? So there's always, you know, the coast, there's Carlisle and Workington and everything else, which I know there's been a lot of government funding there, hasn't there, to put more into the area, and some really good stuff going on. What I'd like to do now is all about planning when you live rurally as well. So I live about 20 minutes, half an hour for a round trip to get a pint of milk. So it's all about planning your shopping. So that's a hint and tip from Carla. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm looking at the time.
I know.
Ross, I'm going to stick with you and just go through the application process, because I think that's something that everybody would like to hear about. So a student applies through GradCracker Hub for either your placements or your graduate opportunities. What are the next stages?
So you'll come into us, and we'll obviously check that you're eligible and you meet our minimum criteria, which is obviously a suitable degree discipline on what you've applied for. You've graduated in the last 3 years, and we're always looking for a minimum of a 2-1 as well. You would then go through to the profession. They would then look at your CV and your application, and like we say, you know, they're looking for that little bit extra. You've tailored your application. If you go through that stage, that you then go through to an aptitude test, which is like numerical and verbal, which quite a lot of, I think, graduate employers use those kind of tests. And then you move on to a video interview now. So previously that would have been a telephone interview, but through COVID, we obviously introduced more technology. So that is now a video behavioural interview. So all of our interviews are based on competencies. So we're just trying to get examples from you of when you've done something that might be related to what you're being asked. So if you're being asked about problem solving, it doesn't need to be specific to Sellafield. It just needs to be specific to your own experiences. And then following that, you would then go to the final stage, which is a virtual assessment centre. So we introduced those last year, and we're still continuing with virtual this year. Obviously, the COVID rules keep changing, and we're back to masks and things like that already. So I think it was a good decision this year. And you would join us on the assessment centre and complete some more activities, which is normally around you join us in the morning and then finish about 1:30. So it's not too tiresome being sat in front of a computer all day, because we know it can be quite, sitting at a screen and you feel a bit lethargic, don't you, from it all day. So that's our process at the minute. Obviously, because of COVID, previously we did do face-to-face centres, but the virtual is working really great, and I think you guys all did the virtual centre as well. So this is our first intake of graduates that came from a completely virtual process. So yeah, it's crazy that we can work this way.
Yeah, definitely. I can't believe we're still working like this. So grads, I know Ross just mentioned about you all coming through virtually. Is there any specific hints and tips you could give a student when they're thinking about applying and going through the application process? And this is out to anybody who wants to unmute themselves and speak up, because I know it's a question that we haven't planned for. Sorry. Come on, Sean.
I'd say for me, when you apply, if you get to the stage of interview, they know you're smart already, like you're going to get your grades. So just let your personality shine through, and don't be shy to be brave and ask questions, and just be yourself, because I think that's what they're really looking for, is if you can get along and get your work done, because they know you have the grades and you're smart enough to do it.
Yes.
Tailor your application. That's the key message from Ross, who's nodding away. Anybody else want to give a hint and tip? Hint or tip?
Yes, I'd say do your research, because I applied to a lot of graduate schemes, but I think this one I really put the effort in, and it really showed, because I got the job in the end.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, good point, Louise. Thank you. Luke, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, it was just along the same lines. I think that when you go towards that, not obviously your application, but they're not expecting you to know everything. They're not expecting you to come in there and wow them about an industry that they've probably had experience of 20 years in. So they're not expecting you to do that, but they're expecting you to have an interest in it and do some research, go online, learn about sort of the current issues that might be there. I think that Sellafield have published a manifesto within the last 12 months. So that sort of highlights what we as an organisation want to be moving towards. So I think there's stuff like we are one team, we support one another, sort of those really basic statements that you can apply to everything that you do. So even if it's something like that, going into an interview and knowing a couple of the manifestos and going, you know what, I align to these manifesto statements, shows that you've gone above and beyond compared to someone that's gone in and go, I really like, I really want a job, like, or along the lines of, yes, it'd be really good to work for your company, and sort of like more vague statements. If you've gone in, you'd be really specific, then I think that will put you on the road to hopefully getting offered a place. So
yeah, I think it's just about showing you're passionate, isn't it? Showing you're passionate about Sellafield, and then aligning your personal passions, like Louise did during her master's course. So it's aligning both of those. So your personal passions and obviously the passions of Sellafield and what they're looking to achieve in the next couple of years. I have got time. I'm going to scrape this one. We're going to do key benefits. So what do you guys think are a key benefit to working at Sellafield? Holly, I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Sean, I'm going to come to you first. Key benefit.
I think the key benefit is that you will actually use your engineering degree here. If you did like engineering at uni, you will have to think like an engineer every day, because there are problems to solve, and if you can't solve that one, they're going to put you on another one, and you have to think differently. Other key benefits, I feel like the structure is really good. Everyone is really helpful, and you have a lot of support for your, not only personally, but for your career as well. You'd have a mentor for your chartership. And yeah, I think there's a good network here as well, because we can rotate every 6 months. The more you talk to people, the more you find out, and you can find out what could really work for you, as well as hit your competencies for your chartership.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a good friendship network as well there, Sean. So thank you for that. Holly, have you got a benefit?
Yeah, I would say I kind of touched on it before, but I think like it's the challenge and sort of like how much you're going to be pushed, and kind of like you're not going to see these risks that are coming together this complex anywhere else. It's such a huge challenge, and I think as well you get to be a part of something that Sellafield are basically going to be world leaders on, really. So this is something that hasn't really been done before, and then obviously as more decommissioning of nuclear sites takes place across the world, other companies will learn from Sellafield. So it's really like, it's such an exciting and challenging place to be.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Holly. Well, we're going to end it there. I cannot believe this hour has gone so quickly. The stories that you guys have got are absolutely phenomenal. So thank you very much for sharing those with us. And thank you, Ross, for joining us today. It's been lovely to see you again. Don't forget, this webinar will be live on the Sellafield Hub tomorrow, and then we'll break it down into bite-sized chunks, which should be live early next week. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you guys. Thank you, Ross. Don't forget, me and Jess are joined by Siemens next Thursday at 2 p.m. So we'll see you all then. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.